Welcome to Judicial Dollars and Cents, brought to you by Anders Virtual CFO Services team from all across the United States. I'm John Scott, and in each episode, we'll shine a light on the financial side of the legal world, turning law firm numbers into impact-driven stories. From taxes and profitability to practice growth and leadership, we sit down with law firm innovators who are shaping the future of the profession. Let's dive in, right here on Judicial Dollars and Cents. Hey, welcome back to Judicial Dollars and Cents, the podcast where we dive into the business side of running a law firm. I'm John Scott with Anders Virtual CFO Services for law firms, and each week we talk with industry experts who help law firm leaders think differently about growth, profitability, and performance so they can build practices that last. Today we welcome Brandon Dawson. Brandon is one of the founding members of Thumbs Up Guys Injury Attorneys, a South Carolina-based firm focused on personal injury and workmen's compensation law. As a founding attorney, Brandon plays a key role in the firm's strategic growth, operations, and client relationships while maintaining an active involvement in casework. Brandon is a Charleston native and got a finance and accounting degree from Clemson, which makes him a unicorn for attorneys. And he graduated in the top 10% of his class from Charleston School of Law, where he participated in the law review and moot court. He's recognized as a South Carolina super lawyer and a rising star, and he's a member of the National Trial Lawyers Top 100. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here, man. I appreciate that kind intro. It certainly makes it sound better than what it is.
Our bios always do. But you truly are a unicorn. Most attorneys don't have the undergraduate background that you have. So I want to help me walk through your origin story. How did you become a lawyer? From going to school for finance, what took you to law school?
Yeah, great question. I really actually had no intention of ever going to law school. I got out in 2007 and got into the finance world. And then 2008 happened. And, it was kind of like, you know what? I didn't really love what I was doing. It was kind of one of those like sales jobs. I was at AXA, kind of like Northwestern Mutual. I was selling 403Bs to teachers sitting in break rooms, and it just didn't really sit well with me. I didn't mind waking up early, and I felt like we were trying to help people, but it just didn't really sit right with me. And, 2008 was just an interesting time to say, hey, is this kind of a hard reset? And one of the things that I felt like was a challenge to me, I was, I think 23 at the time, trying to get in front of people, and they're like, well, you're 23. I couldn't change how old I was. What I could do is get a couple more initials behind my name that I thought would maybe credential me and give me a little bit more authority. I always joke, I said, how can I rack up some student debt at the same time? And so Charleston School of Law had just opened up, not just a few years before. And I didn't really want to leave Charleston again. I'm born and raised just outside of Charleston, went to Clemson and came back and said, look, I don't want to leave. This is, seems like a really good opportunity. And so I thought, all right, this could maybe catapult me into, a lot of different job opportunities. I thought MBAs were kind of a dime a dozen, and that a JD would set me apart a little bit. So that's kind of how I got started. Again, no real intention on, being an actual practicing lawyer at the time. And then, 3 years later, going, all right, now what am I going to do? 2012 wasn't really rosy for jobs either. But I found a passion in helping people through some of my clerkships throughout the summer. I did the billable hours on the defense side. I hated it. And I thought to myself, man, there's no way I can sit here and bill hours and research and write all day. I like talking to people. I like being out. I like being efficient. And I don't think a lot of defense firms care about efficiency. They care about how can you milk this file for as much as it's worth. And that just didn't really sit right with me. So I took a much less paying job at a plaintiff shop. It was just me and another person. And, when I got there, I thought it was going to be a little bit bigger shop. And I realized that the attorney that I thought I was going to be able to kind of rely on, that I was his replacement. So I'm going, where's Greg? Oh, no, I am Greg. And so kind of just hit the ground running at that firm. And the attorney there really, she didn't care to practice law, which is fine. But I really kind of had a, trial by fire and just got thrown in the deep end. It was sink or swim, and just kind of figured it out and started talking to friends of mine that were attorneys and getting questions answered. And I like talking to people. I like the competitive nature of the personal injury side. I like that my interests were aligned with my clients, and so that's kind of the how I ended up getting into the actual practice of law and on the PI side.
Is that when you formed Thumbs Up?
No, that was that would have been 2012 when I graduated. So I was, like I said, the first attorney there is myself and the founding attorney there. I helped grow that firm. It was just the two of us to 50 plus people when I left in 5 years, and then a lot of promises made, not kept over there. Culture wasn't great, and so I thought I was going to be a partner there. That ended up not really working out. Thank God, and ended up during that time I'd recruited some friends over to work at that firm. We all had a vision on how we could do things better, and so actually all four of us were at that firm and said, you know what, I think we truly can do this better. We know a lot. There were a lot of things that we're doing right at that firm, but there are a lot of things that we just didn't agree with. And so we said, all right, let's go try this. And we set off in 2018 and said, let's do it. And so for 2 years after that, from 2018 to 2020, it was just the four of us kind of grinding away, answering phones, being our own paralegal. And, I was used to that. So was, one of my other partners. He was the second attorney hired at that original firm. So he knew what it was like to kind of have to do everything yourself. And the other two guys were grinders, man. I mean, smart, talented, hungry. And so we were all just really aligned in that regard of, we're willing to do whatever it takes to be successful.
That's an awesome progression from Clemson to going to law school. And the defense side probably helps you in what you do today. I want to get to the name, though. So many firms have the personalized name in the firm name. And I think that limits, especially a PI firm that has a real market. I mean, you could sell that practice based on the inventory of cases. So tell me how you came up with the name that is so recognizable and what the origin of that was.
Yeah, so when we branched off, we knew we wanted to grow, and we knew we had a name problem, that Miller, Dawson, Siegel, and Ward was a mouthful and that no one would remember that. And so we went to the first ad agency here locally, great guy, really like him. So we've got a problem. And he said, no, you just lean into it. It's MDSW. We'll work around it. And we were like, all right, hey, you're the expert. After maybe 6 or 9 months of doing that, it just didn't really click. And admittedly, we probably didn't put enough ad spend behind it, but it just didn't really catch. We weren't behind it. It wasn't catchy. And so we said, hey, we really have to do a rebrand. We gotta have one more shot here before we are just flat broke. And we're going to put all our chips in. If we're going to do this, let's really go with what our vision is. And that's something that's not MDSW. So we talked to a bunch of other agencies. We talked to a national personal injury marketing agency out of Nashville, who we still work with today, Whiteheart. And they said, hey, we've got this brand. And they pitched a couple to us. One of them was the Thumbs Up guys. One of them was the Wolf Pack. And, I joke, one of my partners is an NC State grad. And while as much as he wanted to be the Wolf Pack, he understood that was not going to work here. And so we landed on the Thumbs Up guys, and they were like, oh yeah, it's working in all these other markets. They made it sound like it was really working. In reality, there was a 2-man shop that had it, and another guy that actually had a very successful firm that doesn't really use it much. And they kind of sold it that way. We're like, you know what? I guess that'll work. And so I'd love to tell you that we immediately were like, this is it, but we did not. But I do recall we went up. This was in June of 2019, and we shot our first set of commercials up in Nashville with that brand. And I got home and I told my wife, I was like, I think we got something. I was like, this just, it hit different. I was like, I really feel like we've got something here. And I'm kind of an eternal optimist, and she'll kind of joke with me. She's like, you always just think that's it. I was like, I don't know. I'm telling you, there's something catchy about it. And so I don't want to say that I knew it then, but I'd certainly felt it there. And then it just kind of kept steamrolling from there. I mean, I always would tell the story, my grandmother, God rest her soul, she passed away at 102 a few years ago. And I
Wow.
would talk to her even into her late 90s. And she would, of course, she's sitting at home watching television all day, right? What do you do at 95, 96? And she's like, Brandon, I just love those commercials. It can be, my great grandkids know what it means, and I know what it means. There's not many things in life, that transition across so many generations. And that was one of the things that really stuck with me, that it was a brand that really just resonated with almost anybody. And so that was, kind of how it stuck. And it really was. It's been a sticky brand. It's been a great brand, and one that we're super proud to own today. Something that we ended up purchasing from Whiteheart because we believed in it so much. And I completely agree with you, John, that it's something that we can go and put in other markets. That Miller, Dawson, Siegel, and Ward. Nobody wants that. I couldn't go to Atlanta and say, "What do you think about Miller, Dawson, Siegel, and Ward?" They're like, "Why don't we just go with Scott, Dawson, and Smith?" It's like, it doesn't matter. But the thumbs up guys, it's no different than Sweet James, who's Steve Mayer and James have done a tremendous job with growing that brand. It was kind of the same idea. It's just something that's a little bit more catchy.
Any thoughts on expanding beyond Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, we started this firm with an idea of growth, and so I think you have to be really careful not to kind of get out over your skis. And so let's dominate Charleston, which I feel like we're top 3 firm here, depending on kind of what metrics you're looking at, especially the fact that we came in really in 2020, 2019 to compete with people who've been here since the 80s, 90s, and before. So I feel like we've got a really strong foothold here. We've grown in Columbia, something we opened up about almost 2 years ago, coming up this summer, looking to open a Greenville office, getting into that market. So before we expand beyond the state's borders, we really want to own the state. But at the same time, I mean, the landscape's changing so much with private equity money coming in. So certainly thoughts of, how do you structure that? Top Dog Law has done a tremendous job, James Helms, of growing that brand. I mean, same idea, right? He's got a great brand and he's got money behind him to go into different markets and then sell off leads. So there's different ways to approach it. It's just how do you want to do it? There's not a right way or wrong way. It's just, what do you want to do?
The Morgan and Morgan folks have really exploded, and they're just about everywhere. But their advertising and bigger is better. It's not always better, but if you can get the secret sauce in your state, then it's easy to plug and play in the next locality. And this is just my thought. I would go to North Carolina next and just do a regional thing, because that's going to have the same values of your firm, and it's going to be easier to find somebody in that next state to have the same kind of values. Hey,
Yeah, we certainly think staying adjacent makes the most sense. Yeah, you nailed it, man.
so let's change gears a little bit. For younger attorneys that are just getting out of law school, what kind of advice would you give them to start out their career? I mean, you obviously started a little bit of defense and then a smaller PI firm. But if somebody wanted to avoid some of the mistakes you made, or maybe they weren't mistakes, what would you tell a new graduate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you want to do. So trying to figure out as early as you can what you want to do. And that might mean bouncing around between firms early on if you really don't know what you want to do. So really, if you can decide, do you want to go criminal? Do you want to go civil? Do you want to do, a lot more research and writing? Try to figure out what you want to do in law school, ideally. And then when you get out, try to focus in on, find a job at a firm that can let you grow. The other thing I would tell anybody today, man, with the proliferation of AI out there, I would be doing everything I freaking can to be ahead of, most everybody else on the other side. I mean, that's something that we take very seriously over here, and trying to just stay on the cutting edge of that. I think that it's so much easier today to be a 1 or 2 man shop, but operate like you have 20 or 30 people than it ever was, with the ability to just leverage AI. So don't be afraid to go out there and start your own firm, to hustle and just learn. Don't learn by making mistakes. It's okay to make some mistakes. have some mentors, but you don't have to go out and get some huge job, at a firm and be miserable. So that was kind of one of the things that I really wanted to avoid, was being miserable. I was like, I didn't, go to law school to find a job that I hate. And that was, I turned down a much better job on paper, coming out of law school. And a lot of people are like, you're crazy. And I was like, I know I'm going to hate that job. I know the path that's going to put me on, and I'm going to hate it. I was like, I'm not going to do it. And so, I know people always say, follow your passion, the money will follow. I think there's certainly some truth to that, but you do need to make sure that like what you're doing, is going to make money. And so many people, including myself coming out, you don't really understand the income possibilities with different jobs. So, understand a little bit of on the defense side, what does that mean to make partner? Well, you can either be a rainmaker, bring in a bunch of cases, or you're the guy who's grinding on Saturdays and Sundays, who's billing 2,200 hours a year. There's different ways over there to do that
in 6-minute increments.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Just understand what that looks like. Or, you can come on, our side, which I certainly think is the better side, the right side of this, and, battling big insurance and fighting for those, people that are injured and being screwed over by big insurance. And you have the upside to, make a lot more money. I mean, it's a commission-based job for most of us. So when we win big, for our clients, it's also, a reflection on our paychecks. So if you really want to bet on yourself, then I think that the civil plaintiff side is the way to go. Some people like that predictable income, they know they need to make X amount per month. Then, you're probably better suited early on the defense side, but, don't be afraid to bet on yourself would probably be the biggest, advice, that and learning AI.
I love your thoughts about AI, because I find that, and regular listeners have heard me say this before, there's two types of attorneys: one that thinks AI and automation is the ruination of the profession and their craft, and the other that is embracing it. And you're right, it's going to allow small and mid-sized firms to compete upstream, and it's ever changing. I mean, 3 months from now, it's going to be better. And as long as we have the human element overseeing it and reviewing it and use it ethically, it's going to be a game changer for every line of business, because we're going to take the routine, mundane things that are repeatable and we're going to automate them. And we're going to make that allows us the time to step up and do higher level things, to do better work for clients.
Yeah, the more we can do to take those mundane tasks that I always used to joke like a monkey could do, and take those and let AI do them. That gives us more of an opportunity to pour into our clients, learn their stories, just create a better overall client experience. And what I would tell anybody is the AI we have today is the worst it'll ever be. Right. It'll be better tomorrow. And as you just alluded to, it gets better like every week, and every month. It's like insane what new models are coming out. And so, we're continuing to look at, automating, what does the intake look like? Can we have AI agents on intake? I don't think we're quite there yet. I think it's a little weird. But at the same time, like that's coming. I mean, whether you want to, admit it or not, like people will be receptive to that much sooner than we think. And that's just one little piece that you're going, all right, well, is that going to, how is that going to affect our business? We already have AI agents that can call the insurance company and set up claims. That's something that used to take 30 or 45 minutes of just really rote, mundane work. When you're setting up hundreds of files every single month, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of people. And guess what? The agents can work, simultaneously. So they can be setting up multiple claims at one time. So those are just some really small examples of, I think people aren't even aware of. If you're not at a minimum aware of and using ChatGPT, then you're way behind. And if all you're using is ChatGPT and you're using it like Google, then I think you could probably ask it, how can I be a better utilize AI better? Because that's just again scratching the surface of what we're doing.
Yeah, we're all going to have to stay abreast of the changes in that area. Your firm has had phenomenal growth, and it sounds like you're really employing automation, and that's something we preach. We want to push down repeatable tasks and get the finances clean, high and tight, so that we can then forecast and make good decisions on a go-forward basis. I want to talk about, we'll switch gears a little bit. How do you juggle work-life balance in your practice?
I think being intentional about what's important with work and what's important with family, and defining that, before you start the year. Yeah, there's Jesse Eatzler has this thing called the big ass calendar, and it's this. The idea is when the year starts, you already know the vacations you're going to set, you're going to go on, the maybe the weekend trip you're going to take with your son or your daughter. You're really like planning it out so that there's never an excuse to say, well, I didn't have enough time. And then you backfill from there your work. And so if you start from a place of, hey, family first, well, then it's a lot easier than trying to make family fit inside of work. And I think that's the approach that I look at and try to take is, all right, what can we plan out as far in advance, and lock that in? And that's kind of a non-negotiable this year. I really wanted to spend some more time with just me and my wife. I've got a 7 and a 9-year-old, and I love them and I love spending time with them. But it's nice to have some time with like just you and your spouse. And so I said, gosh, when can I find time between soccer and dance and gymnastics and all the things? And there's not a lot of time outside of, that 9 to 5 window. And we're fortunate enough that we're at a size where I can say, all right, what I'm going to do every Wednesday from, I'm going to take the morning and I'm going to spend that time, and Jess and I are going to do something together. So, we're taking pickleball lessons. I want to get better at that. And, just spending some time together in the morning. And again, that was very intentional this year to carve that time out. So kind of the lesson there is, I think, just being super, super intentional with it and carving it out, put it on your calendar. This is what I'm going to do. And it's a non-negotiable.
So you're taking control of the calendar rather than letting the calendar control you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because as you well know, I mean, if you're not putting it on the calendar, you're not planning it, then what's the old adage? If you plan to fail, then you
fail to plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I always get, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, before we wrap up, I want to ask you kind of an off the wall question. You went to Clemson. Are you a football fan?
Absolutely.
So how long is the runway for Dabo Swinney not embracing NIL and still being the guy who says, I've won a national championship, so just trust me?
Well, he's won 2 national championships. He's been to 4. Not many coaches can say that. I don't think there's any coach out there right now that is actively coaching that has that same resume.
Agreed.
I don't think Ryan Day has done. I think he's won 2, but I don't think he's been to 4. And obviously Saban's retired. So I think his runways should be very long. I think Dabo, talk about being intentional. He cares about his people.
He does.
Culture matters, and the type of people that graduate from Clemson, where they are later in life. I mean, I talk about this all the time with my kids. It's like, I want them to be the best athlete and student now, but is the best version of them at 8, like, is that really like what I care about the most, or do I really care about who they are 20 and beyond? Are they like a really great human? Are they adding the value to society? That really, I think, is the great measure of who you are and your legacy. And I think his legacy is going to be that he won national championships and he's famous for that, but there's going to be so many young men that are impacted by him that will have a trickle down effect for generations. I always talk about it in terms of like, what's on your headstone. I think that there's going to be a lot of people that he has impacted what's on their headstone, that they are great fathers, they are great leaders, that they are just absolutely amazing beneficiary or benefits to society as a whole. And so I hope that Clemson will continue to give him plenty of leeway there. He certainly has to adapt. And I think last year we saw that he did. Unfortunately, we just, Cade took about 10 steps backwards. We've had some bad hires. Our OC, just was not a good fit. And so bringing Chad Morris back, I'm excited about that. With anything, football is one of those things where you're doing what you think is best at the time. And, you can't judge it until, years later. Like, was that the right hire? On paper, people celebrate. It's just like no different than the draft, right? We're going to have the draft here coming up in April, and people, Mel Kiper's going to grade the draft, and he's going to say they're an A and all this. And you're going to look back years and be like, that was the worst draft pick ever. Yeah. And so it's always funny to me, like when people talk about like they know. It's like, you don't know. The only real measuring stick here is what actually happened. But yeah, Dabo certainly has to adapt, and I think he is becoming more aware of that. The landscape is changing. I hate really what's happened to college football in general. We've got several $40 million rosters these days.
Well, and NIL has really changed the landscape, much like AI. But what it did was it just shook everything up. But it also created these mercenary players who, a friend of mine has a son who plays basketball, and the dad played basketball, Division III, son's playing Division II, and he's pretty good. And his agents come to him and said, hey, you got to transfer because you can get $400,000 a year. You're never going to play in the NBA, but for the next 3 years, you can make $1 million too. And that's just on the small side of athletics. These Division I first round picks, they're making a lot more money than that, but it is allowing the non-blue bloods to compete up. And I don't know how I feel about it. I think some of the changes could be that I would do if I were king, to say, hey kid, you get one time to transfer. Unless your coach leaves or gets fired, then you get a second chance at it. But every year when people are just moving rosters, it's insane.
Yeah, I mean, we have a model. It's called the NFL. I mean, the NBA, the MLB. I mean, you have a contract. It is, I don't know why this has to be so complicated. And
a salary cap would be welcome.
Exactly. The reason we have a salary cap is because if there's no parity, there's not fun to watch.
Right.
If 4 teams are just dominating, it's kind of like the MLB. I mean, it's not that much fun to watch when it's Yankees, Dodgers. I mean, Mets. I mean, I think 3 of the 4 in the essentially the final 4, the AL and the NL finals were the top payrolls. I mean, it's not really rocket science. And every now and again, you get a Moneyball, Oakland A's sort of team that makes it through. But for the most part, it's just who has the most money. And that doesn't become a really fun, environment to watch football or any sport for that matter. So I do think that we have a model. It's the professional model. And if we're going to pay them, they're professionals, they're not students. I think Carson Beck who was being interviewed, and they're like, how do you balance class? Like, class, I hadn't been in 2 years. Like, I mean, he was at least honest. I think he tried to correct himself, but
and I think he's 37 years old.
So they're professionals, they're getting paid, and let's put a salary cap on it and make it have a little more parity in it, and not have the mercenaries as you're alluding to, because that's really what it is. It's kids jumping around. That's not really what's best for them to go from one school to the next. But I also don't blame them one bit, because they have no other shot to make any money, and it's wild that you can make that much money in college. So, hey, strike while the iron's hot. I'm all for the players getting paid. Let's just make sure.
What a great start to your savings. If you could, save most of that, invested at 18 years old or 19 years old, that you have money for life. If you don't, if you have good advisors around you, a good family.
If you're smart with it, you're exactly right. You're set, and you're not blowing it on Lamborghinis and Rolexes and, other stuff.
Hey, I really appreciate you being on the show today. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you if they want to?
Yeah, you can give me a call here at the office, 843-284-7672. But shoot me an email, Dawson@mdswlegal.com. If you can't remember any of that, just Google a Thumbs Up Guys or visit npayne.com, and you can find me on there.
I did that. Thank you, Brandon, so much. And thank you all for tuning in to Judicial Dollars and Cents. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us grow and ensures you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time on Judicial Dollars and Cents. Thanks for joining us on Judicial Dollars and Cents, presented by Anders Virtual CFO Services. If you found value in today's conversation, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. To learn more about how Anders helps law firms strengthen their financial foundations and drive growth, visit anderscpa.com. Until next time, keep making smart decisions that make perfect sense.